So today I'm going to be taking a look at this piece, and I just wanted to talk about how much further to take it and where some of its issues might be. And I wanted to pose it on Portrait Studio for you guys really quickly and kind of just try to make this illustration work a little. So one of the biggest issues I feel like is that it feels like the camera, it feels like she's facing the camera. So like she's right here. Let me get my pencil out. She's right here and the camera is right here. Okay? So she's just directly facing the camera. If she was lying down and it was like, well, let's draw her lying down. All right, so this is the water and this is her. You probably didn't even know that she was floating in some water, right? So this is her facing upward, floating on the water on her back, and the camera is like right here instead, right? So it doesn't feel like it's this, but I feel like the artist's intention was this angle. What it feels like is this one, which is just facing the camera directly. But that doesn't make much sense. That means that the camera had to be just like completely on her that way. So you've kind of disrupted the feeling that the viewer is the one seeing her. Of course the camera can face the character from top down like that. Of course the camera can just directly face someone while they're laying down. A person can't. And we want to film like we're the person as much as possible. You have certain films that don't do that. They don't care about whether or not it feels like someone's watching it. It doesn't feel as personal. I feel like it's more personal when the camera is behaving like the person, like the audience watching the character. So if she was laying down, I was there in front of the pond or whatever it was, I was holding the camera. I'd be holding the camera like that. Okay, I'd be like, yeah, you look good. Okay, and I just and this is me because my nose is a little bit bigger. So let's fix some of these issues here. Okay, isn't she floating in water? Yes, she is. So what I want to do is kind of use some perspective, just because it's good for the illustration to apply just one more level of perspective. So we start with the nose. Okay, and then basically what we're trying to do is push the whole face up. So before I do anything, the nose is what I start with to signal the perspective. The nose alone did so much. You almost drew the nose like it was head on. Did you see? Do you see that? The nose that you drew looked like it was head on because you didn't show us the entirety of the nostril from underneath. All right. So now that I've changed the nose, I've signaled the perspective where what I'm looking for in the model. So I'm just gonna do that. Oops. Oh my God. Okay. So I want to do something like that. I don't even want to move the arms because the arms look great. They look like they're floating in water. But I do want to change the perspective. And I kind of want to tilt the head up this way. And I want to see what I can do with that. The ripples of the water are perfectly facing the camera, so I kind of want to change those as well, so that we're looking at something that's like a combination of these two right here. Something in between or a combination. So maybe something a little bit more like that. So we'll see the neckline the way you did. We'll see the shoulders the way you did. We'll have some movement in the arms. Maybe we'll try to make it a little more asymmetrical. Okay. And we'll have some of the breasts going above the water surface. And then we'll have the head kind of in the way of some of those ripples. I'll try to make the ripples as much as I can also in this slight perspective. Okay? So it started off with the nose. Now I'm going to try to adjust the rest of the face. And the nose really is what will make this feel like we are looking at her through that low angle. So before, after, before, after. It feels like we are watching her on the surface of the water, from the edge of the water, wherever we are with the camera. This means that the eyebrows are further away from the face. The nose is, there's less bridge and more nose and more nostril. And I have to do the rest with transform, because or else the nose is just going to keep getting distorted. Okay, so before, after, before, after. So we're just trying to make it feel like this character is floating on the surface of the water. When character is looking up, we no longer see the edge of the neckline. So we see a shadow, we don't see an edge. So I'm just going to be smudging that out a little bit. We also see less of the forehead. Actually, that will be with transform. We see less of the forehead and more of the lower part of the face. So less of the forehead, meaning it's less vertical, and more of the chin. The character looks up, the forehead slowly starts to recede away from us until the forehead is no longer visible. Do you see that? So if a character is looking away, the forehead is shrinking in width. Look at this width compared to this width, right? And so that's why we do that. When we see more of the chin, though, we see more of that entire area. Right? So we're just shifting things up. And then, I'm not sure, I'll check the before to see if I change the expression at all. So just adding a little bit of perspective goes a long way. And then there's the perspective of the body, which is just going to be, the entire dress seam is going to pretty much help us build that. So I'm going to start with the arms and the shoulders. And don't worry about the ripples, I'll get the old ripples back. And so this right here, this is what's going to help us make that perspective. The bump of the breasts along this, I don't know what it's called in seamstressing. What is it called? in sewing, that type of dress line, whatever, this type of dress line. And what it's going to do is it's going to reveal that perspective for us. All the work was done by that seam line. And I want the dress to look puffy because it'll look puffy under all that water. The water puffs the air out that's stuck inside the fabric and makes it puff up. Maybe when you first go in the water, and then after a while there's no more air. All the air has been expelled. So I want to show a little bit of both. And then I just want to tuck the rest of that upward. Okay. And then I'm just going to show where those darker bits of the environment are in between the sleeves. And I also want to show the rest of the dress. So just adding a bit of perspective goes a long way. All right, so I'm just trying to duplicate that rippling that they did, or ruffling, I think it's called. Okay. So now we have two worlds. We have the world under the water, and we have the world above the water. And what we want to do is distance them from each other. What's the fucking word? Separate them from each other. Create a distinction between them. Yeah, I inhaled too much gas today. There was a gas leak in my house. All right. If I don't make any sense today, blame the gas leak. It made me so dizzy. So what happened is you have the same skin tone as you do for the area under the water. So I'm just going to slightly shift this skin tone. I'm not going to try to get rid of that ghostly green eerie look. I love that look. So I just want to like just slightly add a bit more of a flesh tone. Do you see that? It's barely different. It's barely different, but it's something. And the eye will pick it up. Because if it's green underwater and green above water, then it's just, it's not enough distinction. Okay. And then I also want to select which parts of this dress are above the water. Which parts of her shoulders are slightly above the water. And I want to do the same thing. The parts of the shoulders will get the same hue shift. So the parts of the shoulders here get the same hue shift. All right. And they're also going to get a little outline and a little bit of that same water ripple, that same water line. And the parts of the dress are going to get a level change. So they're going to get more contrast because they're now above the water. So they get a bit more contrast. Okay, same with the shoulders. They get a bit more contrast as well. Anything that's above the water. And they're going to get those same watery ripples that you had in the rest of the face area. Okay. And same thing here. Just general placeholders here for wherever we have that value. So now we have all these different changes in what's above water, what's under the water. Now we can just freely use like almost the underwater atmospheric perspective, let's say. And I'm just going to get like a turquoisey bluish green on, like lighten. And I'm going to use that on all the areas that I feel like are deeper in the water. Just to push them back a little bit further. Now I'm being very careful not to overdo it. And I feel like this necklace may float up a little bit as well. Okay, so we have all this extra atmosphere now, and so I'm just going to delete away at what I don't need. And so we kind of push things under the water a little bit further. And I'm also going to reduce the amount of detail you have for things that are under the water. We shouldn't be seeing so much detail. And there should be a bit of a distortion happening. And I think that really will take it to the next level. So anything that is under the water gets either blurred or smudged so that these ripples don't have to combat all of the detail of the hair. The ripples really are the star of the show when it comes to the texture of the water. So just smudging things out a little bit goes a long way. And your ripples are all evenly spaced. They should be at least expanding away from each other. And so burn on shadows, and I'm just trying to darken this lower half right here, this upper half over here. So it looks more like a formation on the earth or something like that. All these like perfect, looks like a Google Maps, like a Google Images from space type pattern. Do you see what I'm saying? Like it looks too perfect. And it looks some kind of like geological formation or something like that. So again, all I'm doing is, and I'm going to get rid of this ripple here and this ripple here, just because I distorted that. I'll bring the other ripples back. The closer her hair gets to the surface, the more her hair should be red. So I'm going to try to make it a little bit more red the closer she gets. So the closer we get to the top, the more of her hair we see. So I'm like bringing the hair in slowly. And then the hair has more of a generalized kind of glow for the lower part of the canvas, or the outsides of the hair. Okay, so being very careful where I place any color. I'm going to use a bit of that red around the mouth. The way you rendered the face is just a little bit muddy. The eyebrows are not blended in with the face. Let me change the image size now. Oh boy. That'll help me smudge better. And so I'm just blending away the eyebrows so they connect in. And you're full on outlining the nose from either side. That's not a good thing. You need to have faith in your edge and the highlights that you have. The lips, I understand if that's pigmentation or blood or something. A little bit of that brownish red for the eyebrow area. And then for the eyes, they need to be in perspective as well. So one of them seems like it's more in perspective than the other. That's just a matter of lifting the lower eyelid so it looks like it's looking up. So all we did was change the perspective a bit to give the illustration something a little bit more dynamic for the viewer, instead of just a head-on view with the camera. She also looks like she's puckering her lips. So I just want to get rid of that look a little bit. And just at least try to show a separation between the upper and lower lip. It's starting to turn into a smile, so I'll fix that. Okay. I'm getting back the crease in the eyes. It's accidentally made it into an Asian eye. Or maybe it was, I can't remember. And then be careful with dodge tool, but I'm about to use it to make the skin feel a little bit more glossy. I'm smudging around the eyebrows so they feel a little bit more like they're grown into the skin, out of the skin. And then dodge tool. And anywhere where we have a bit more like light, I want to throw a bit more of that gloss. Even if it discolors a little bit, that's okay. Around the edges of anything. Building almost like a highway of highlight. Anything we usually highlight gets highlighted even more so. Around the nose, a little bit around the chin, around the upper lip, and the crease of that lower lip area. Around the lips as well. Just to add that bit of water and wetness. And then sponge on desaturate. And actually, I don't know if it's still there, but I might change the skin tone one more time just so it feels more red. And so these ripples here, what's bothering me about them is that they are very flat. And they're not doing what ripples do, which is they start really close together. And they kind of have an uneven distribution depending on what's caused the ripple. So what was the last movement in the water that caused the ripple? And they're closer together the closer they get to the object that is causing the ripples. So I don't know what color you used here. Maybe it's this one. And so I want these ones to be a bit closer together and these ones to be further apart. It has nothing to do with perspective. It's just about the waves caused by these small changes in the surface. They're further apart the further we get. And I want to show how some of these waves are coming from the shoulders as well as the head. And they're kind of colliding. And then I'll blur all of these, and I'll be blurring a little bit more as well as I continue. And I want to show how these ripples also cast shadows under the water. So each ripple gets like a cast shadow. Okay. So each ripple is like, it's not denser water, it's just like more water. So they kind of stack, the water is stacking. And then I'm letting some of that skin tone transition slowly as it reaches the surface. So the neck gets a bit more skin tone. But we get less and less skin tone the further we move away from the surface. And we get more of that green. Then I'm going to get sponge tool and saturate. I'm going to saturate in some pockets here and there. The image is pretty colorless. So we want to bring some saturation back, even if it's just a little bit of that aquamarine color. And over here, we're pretty close to the surface, so really it should be mostly those ripples. The next thing I will do is get smudge tool on like that brush, which is like a soft brush, and just see if I can start smudging the surface of the water to smudge the image underneath it. Do you see that? So that will help us create these ripples and the surface disturbance of the water. It'll just make things look more watery. Just raising the strength up. And just trying to show where these ripples are. Be confident with them because they're confident in real life, these ripples and distortions. Just checking the navigator to see if they read okay. And then getting my smudge brush again on scatter. And it's pretty close to a tile canvas, so I'm not sure if I want to raise the canvas up vertically or, above the head or below the head vertically, or if I want to make it a horizontal canvas. But all in all, I think most of your work needs to go into using like these skin tone colors, any colors nearby to continue these ripples underwater. So you use the skin tone, the colors of the surfaces nearby are what the color of the water adapts to. And so like these ripples here are really bothering me because they don't feel like even ripples. So I want to try to do that. Oy. Then a couple more over here. And I think it's kind of overdoing the ripples as well. But it just depends on like what, I'm just trying to follow the original artist's design for the ripples. But it's always best to just find a reference of someone underwater and see what the water is doing. I feel like it's less like ripples and more like bumps in the water. I'm just gonna keep going there. So then there's the eyes, which are the yellow in the eyes feels very mystical. So what I want to do is do some quick little changes with the exposure. So now that we did the perspective, I want to just mess with the exposure a little bit. So I'm going to darken and I'm going to colorize. And the reason I want to darken is so that we're only deleting really where we know we have light. So it adds a bit of dimension to the form. I'm being very picky where I place the light and just following the shadows that you have here. I'm just trying to create a kind of a darker mood to the scene. And then the color wash takes care of the fact that some of these colors aren't exactly harmonizing. And the color wash doesn't have to be the exact same color. It can be something a little bit more like that, where we just get more of that murky underwater look. She still has yellow eyes. She's still got a lot of that skin tone that's dead, but also catching a little bit of light. But there's a little bit more harmony. And then I want to see if I can also saturate a bit as well. That same color. Just like this murky underground color, almost like algae. And I want to just throw it wherever I can. Just around all those pockets in between her face. And actually, I don't think that's changing anything at all. And then a little bit more here, just so we have a bit of that water, whatever it is. So there's that color wash, which I may raise up just a bit. There's the darkening, and I'm just gonna flatten, and then I'm just gonna try to saturate like one more time, see what I could pull off. Just so we have a bit more of those watery colors. And then because this is kind of like the darker half of the canvas, I'm just gonna darken that far half. And then see if I can get dodge tool and mess around with this half of the canvas, which is sort of like where the light is coming from. So just to show a bit more of that water, or the surface of the water. Okay, and so I'm going to duplicate the layer, filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And I just want to blur some of these elements away. So I'm going to start off with a really strong blur. And then I'm going to duplicate again, filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and do like a medium blur. And the first one is going to be deleted at the face. So just the face, and some of these details aren't blurred. And then for this one, we're deleting everything except the outside edges of the canvas. So we have like extreme blur on the edges and minor blur along the middle. And for the layer with the minor blur, I'm just gonna blur away some of these ripples. Really, it would have been more effective, let me show you, if you did the ripples not as a line, but as a smudge line. You just get smudge brush on smudge, and you increase the strength, and you just do the smudges of the ripples like this. Like you're just smudging the entire like canvas, really. And the ripples look a lot more realistic this way, instead of actually trying to line in those ripples. Like you can go all the way 100%, increase the size of your brush, okay, maybe not that much, and you're just like doing the ripples as they actually work in real life. I feel like that would have looked better and more accurate for what these ripples are actually trying to do. But because you sketched in the ripples, they felt flatter. And then if you want, on dodge tool, you can find which ripples are like catching the light, like this one, and just use dodge tool on top of some of these ripples. So it's like dodge tool and smudge tool combined. Really, that is what's happening. The image of the person under the water is being literally distorted and smudged by the water's movement, but also the sunshine is illuminating every one of these smudges. So the tool, dodge tool and smudge tool, are doing what the matter is actually doing in real life. Or, you know, the fluid, not the matter. And like a couple more little changes here and there. And I'd really want to go in and find which ripples are getting like the most light, but not draw out the whole ripple. Just pick where the light is hanging out the most, and those ripples along that path of light get the most light. But I don't want it to look oily, but because I'm layering so many of these, it's going to look a little bit oily in my version. And I'm just drawing how some of these ripples are hanging out by the face. And there's always like a little ring of light and some bubbles hanging out by every feature, catching the light. And this is all with Dodge tool, I think, yes. Okay, so it's a little bit too much of these continuous rings. So I'm just going to like reduce it in some areas. But hopefully that ends up reading. And then again, just trying to show that murky depth of the water in certain areas here and there. And how everything under the water is losing contrast. So we'll see how much of these changes I keep and how much I discard. I'm bringing in a little bit of that red again, the red of the hair. Just at the very top. Just mixing it in. I wish I had more time to really jump into some more of these details of the water, especially. I'm going to give this little bell some light, since it's part of the focal point. And I don't want the lips to look so muddy, so I'm actually going to borrow this skin tone and just use it on the lips. And see if I can try to bring it more to like a dead nude lip, you know, like she's not alive, but there's still a bit of color there. But she's not wearing lipstick, because that's what it felt like. She was wearing some lipstick. And the only thing I keep are just where we had contrast that we need. So the dark spots, a little bit on the shadow side. But the darker lip is also adding something of its own. So it's really up to you. I just feel like they were a bit too dark and muddy, but I guess I'll leave it alone since it's the original artist's design, or something in between. It still feels too dark, but that's okay. One more thing I want to add is like I think they do have it on distort, wave, ripple. I don't use this one that often, but size large. Oh Lord, it's so ugly. Yeah, definitely not this one. I think it's wave, filter. These are so old school. Distort, wave, wavelength. Oh Lord. That might be nice. Like obviously we keep the layer underneath, but do you see what I'm saying? So you use that as a layer underneath all of this, because it literally just looks like water, and then you can blur it. So, oh Lord. So in some of these areas, we could just do it. So it's really just for the area with the water. So like just around these areas. So just adding some kind of like watery texture, filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And then just adding something in there that's not always ripples coming out of her face. Do you see what I mean? But you can experiment with that tool at your own risk. It's actually pretty intense. I do need to distort it to make sure it matches the perspective. That is necessary. But just a little bit of extra distortion can go a long way. A true masterpiece. But do you guys see the difference? Before it was just too repetitive, and here we just want to see more of that like watery madness, the distortion of the water surface. And just like anything extra to add. But yeah, use that tool at your own risk. So I'm gonna just take a look at the before and after now, see what I like, what I'm keeping, and what I'm getting rid of. So before, image size, I think I made it 2000. After, so we added a bit of, so I do want that darkness back, I guess. So, but anyway, let's talk about the differences. So we change the perspective so it feels a little bit more like we have an involvement with the character. So that darkness, you're actually darker than what I did. So let me keep some of your darkness, which makes the water look more scary, more eerie, more creepy, which I like. Always ready for some darkness. And so there's that. So before, so we didn't feel like we were looking at a character underwater. Honestly, the first time I saw this, I thought that it was a character who was doing a sound wave coming out of their face. Like they were having psychic visions. And then upon seeing it a second time while browsing Reddit today, I realized it's a character underwater. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this isn't a character underwater. Oh, no, it is because of these little ripples around the face. Okay. And then after, a little bit more perspective, a little bit more realism. And maybe you can throw in a bit more contrast now that we added more contrast on one level. You can throw in a bit more contrast on the light side only. So like wherever we have the light coming in. So now it's like unmistakably underwater. We separated the type of values of the area underwater and the area above the water by making the contrast a little stronger. And I do want to sneak in a bit of that subsurface and saturation I added before, which is just that surface of the water. And you could like add in those ripples. As the water ripples, it creates patterns. If you really wanted to go that far, you could use that dodge tool as well for that reason. So just a bit of perspective, and it made it feel more immersive, like we're kind of watching her float. And I don't know, it's up to you guys. Do you feel like it's improved it? Do you feel like it's flattened it out? Maybe the artist can find a balance of the two so that we could, you know, get the best of both worlds. I want to see if I can push the saturation here a little bit more. Because those little spots of green and blue, those turquoisey spots, they're really, really fun. And they just give the piece something else. So just because it's so dark, we need something to kind of wake the piece up. But anyway, what happens if I just delete and get your old ripples back? like that little line there of highlight. But it doesn't match the perspective. But if you just did something like that, that would look really pretty. Or something like that. And with Dodge tool, just try to bring in some more of those ripples. Maybe that looks a bit better. Something we would easily find if we looked up a reference. But because it's just a standard critique hour, I don't have time to search for references. But something that's a bit of both. I do this a lot. I do a lot of the go back in the history and see if you like what it looked like before and if you can combine it with what you've done now. Sometimes we do overwork pieces, and it's just part of the process not to. But this does have to be changed a bit. So before, after. Okay, so that was a interesting critique hour. But if you do have a if you have the app option, try to make her skin look just a little bit more pink above the surface of the water, so that not everything is kind of green and murky. And of course, there's that canvas size, but I didn't want to increase the size of the canvas too much. There's also the flatness of her perspective, but also her arms weren't doing anything. And there wasn't much volume. It would be really cool if you were to... Here, let me see if I can even do it. This is going to be crazy. Something like that. To kind of make it look even more distorted. Nah. Anyway, I'll let you guys go. Thank you guys for watching today. So if you want your work critiqued, all you have to do is go to istebrak.com and click on the subreddit icon right here. That'll take you to the subreddit where you can get your work for critique, where you can submit your work for critique. And today's critique was simply just about adding perspective to try to add a level of a dynamic filmmaking to it, and try to make it feel a little bit more like we as the viewers are involved in the viewing process of this Ophelia character floating in water. Look up a good reference for what water does. Look at the changes in values, and make sure you understand the world underwater and the world above water are very, very different in contrast and color and detail and edge sharpness. Looking up reference before you try any major atmospheric stuff like that, I call it atmospheric, but it's underwater, is really, really good because it helps you control a lot of those hidden material physics that are happening in there. Thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you guys next class. Bye.